You don't persecute me, I persecute you. Hi, I'm Mark.
Hi, I'm Scott. And this is Church is Lame, the podcast where we fix the church by talking about the stupid things churches do that break the entire body. Mark, what do you got for us this week?
I got a few things, and none of them are uplifting or positive in any way, shape, or form. So,
Are they ever?
yeah, K-Love is never going to sponsor anything I choose to talk about, just period.
Wouldn't that be the ultimate coup if we could get Moody Bible Institute or K-Love or Air One to sponsor us? That'd be fantastic.
I mean, if by sponsor you mean burn at the stake as heretics, I think we could probably get WMBI to do something to us.
Right.
But yeah, until we stop harassing, some of their ways of thinking, I don't think they're going to go for it.
Not likely.
Yeah. So I got this story here, and it was on CBN, and it's talking about this D. James Kennedy Ministries. And, these people were really hurt and offended that the Southern Poverty Law Center declared them an anti-LGBT hate group. And yeah, I know. Go figure. And it's just because they say, in the past, they've said things like, hey, all homosexuals want to have sex with children.
Oh gosh.
I know it's madness, right? That this would be labeled a hate group, because none of these organizations ever say anything that's demonstrably untrue,
right.
Spreading it as if it's gospel.
Yeah. Or playing with the boundaries of acceptability. They don't play on that line at all ever.
Right. And, SPLC is just trying to say look, this is an extremist group. They're anti-LGBT. That's what we say about them. And this somehow became a thing where this ministry, who the article points out has been doing ministry for 50 years. So, half a century of hating gays. Right. Fantastic. That this organization decided to sue the SPLC.
Right.
For slander or libel. I'm not sure. I always get confused which one applies to this kind of a thing, since it's online, not in print,
Yeah.
But so they sued it, and they lost the case, and then an appeal, they continued to lose the case, and they pushed it all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court declined to even bother with it.
Right. So let's take a step back for a second.
Sure.
Because I don't want to assume that everybody knows what the Southern Poverty Law Center is. So let's have that conversation real quick. The Southern Poverty Law Center is exactly what it sounds like if you take those words and deconstruct them. Southern, South, poverty, poor people, law, things having to do with the legal system. Center. This is an organization that was founded to study and to advocate for people who are discriminated against because of their social status. Effectively, years later after they've been founded, they've evolved over time, and it's not just anything having to do with just poverty. That now the Southern Poverty Law Center will deal legally with a range of legal issues that still center around people who have less and who are marginalized compared to those who have every legal tool available to them, so to speak.
Yeah, and it's a good organization, and they don't undertake declaring groups as extremist groups as a light task.
Right.
Even though people on the right will generally spend, the political right will generally complain about every time that the SPLC does this, right? So it's when the SPLC at some point, I believe, declared the Proud Boys as an extremist group,
right?
And that got all sorts of backlash. It's just if you look at why they did that, there are reasons. You don't have to agree with it, but it's that's kind of where they fall in the political world,
right? And that's what I was just going to say. More important than them being good or bad, I think that the Southern Poverty Law Center is consistent. Right?
Yes.
You can see a consistency in when they decide to step up to the plate and take action. Usually, I can't think of a time where there was a shade of gray involved, right? Like
Mhm.
clearly, like we're talking about like white supremacy. We're talking about, LGBTQ issues. We're talking about any sort of issue where there is a clearly marginalized or oppressed population, right? So like so you're talking about like and I think that the origins of this in the South, because obviously in the South is where you find the oppression of black people, where it originated and where it continues, you know?
Yeah, it
And
really
so
began when that whole milieu of Southern racism and Jim Crow and all that good stuff.
yeah. So and of course, like obviously there's political reasons why any conservative, Republican, right-leaning organization would want to push back, right? It's good for polls, it's good to raise money, it's good for campaigning. But on the whole, I don't think anybody who is serious about making policy and who believes that policy is a way to make positive change in this country, I don't think anybody in that spectrum of people has a real problem with the Southern Poverty Law Center.
No, I mean it's people that are on the generally I would say like on the farther right
Yeah.
are the ones that are going to have the problem with it, as an organization, and that's probably because they're the ones that are like starting to like maybe not tread the water, but like maybe like they have like a foot hanging off the dock into the waters of like someone like the extremist kind of thought.
Yeah.
And of course this church is like, well, we're not extremists, we're just teaching, what has been, like been the traditional teachings of the church for 2,000 years.
Yeah.
Except that, no, it's not, because
Right.
you're out there like teaching that, all gays are pederasts or pedophiles, whatever word you want to use there. It's like
Yeah.
that kind of thing is what gets you labeled a hate group, because you're teaching lies.
Right.
And I'm just happy that, that the Supreme Court just didn't even want to hear this case, because they're
Exactly.
like, they're like, you have to demonstrate, actual malice. Like that's the term that was used in the article. I don't know if that's the legal term,
Yeah.
or mens rea, I think might actually be like the legal term. But it's like, yeah, you have to show that these people were trying to harm you in some way. But it's like,
Right.
there are several Christian organizations, that are listed on, the SPLC's site as an extremist group for one reason or another.
Right. There's an age-old saying, a truism, that history is written by the winners.
Yes.
And so, like, we know that D. James Kennedy Ministries,
D.
right?
James Kennedy Ministry.
When they go around spouting things like, well, we've just been teaching what's been taught by the Bible for centuries. Well, no, nobody's been teaching the hate of gay people for centuries. This is a fairly new phenomenon where the American church has got its panties in a bunch over abortion and over the LGBTQ community. We can pretty much, like, we can pinpoint this pretty much to Newt Gingrich and his take all prisoners approach to politics. They decided that we needed wedge issues, and we needed a way to solidly get Christians on one side of the voting spectrum, and these were the kind of issues that made it easy for Christians to say, well, if the Republicans are campaigning on this, then I need to side with them. And it's unfortunate, because you shouldn't be siding with Republicans or Democrats. We're supposed to be siding with Jesus, the last time I checked.
You're only saying that because it's fact.
I don't know. That's what I thought. Like,
Yeah.
when we say, like, I accept Jesus as my Lord and my Savior. Well, if Jesus is my Lord, then Joe Biden can't be my Lord. He can be my president, but he can't be my Lord. Donald Trump
Right.
can't be my Lord. Money can't be my Lord. The approval of others can't be my Lord. Jesus the Messiah has to be my Lord.
Well, because
yeah.
like I see where you're going on this, and I think like the important thing here is like when you have a teaching, let's say like Exodus 20, for instance, which mentions something about not testifying falsely.
Yeah.
Right. It's like if you are not able to be troubled as a Christian, in your ministry to teach that which is demonstrably true and to, exile that which is demonstrably false, you are breaking one of the 10 commandments.
Right.
And when Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, you are breaking that commandment. I shouldn't say Jesus.
Right.
Jesus and Deuteronomy say, love your neighbor as yourself. So it's like, this isn't love. You are profaning the name of God by saying that you stand up for truth, but you preach stuff that's false.
Yeah.
I don't care if your intention is good either. It's like, you have to, live up to the whatever, what do I want to say? Like, live up to the promise of your ideals, I guess.
Yeah. In the last 3 decades, there's been this resurgence of kind of this new reformed theology. Mark Driscoll, Matt Chandler, what's his name?
John MacArthur?
John Piper.
John Piper, okay.
Piper, right? And they all kind of have this shtick that as men of the church, we are to be these masculine contenders, is the word they would use, like a boxer, right? That it is our job to contend for our faith, to fight for it, as if God himself is not capable of fighting for himself. He's not capable of a great flood. He's not capable of righting the wrongs all by himself, right? That somehow, it's our job to defend him. And so, like D. James Kennedy, they take this idea to a whole nother level, right? Like, it's the same as, so there are these ladies who just went to court because they decided that they could break and enter into an abortion facility, right?
Yeah.
They take it to this Uber, like, we can do anything we want with impunity without repercussions because we're the church. And it's like, well, if you think breaking and entering onto private property and ignoring other people's right to privacy is the church, then you and I are not part of the same church. If you think railing against LGBTQ people 24/7 is the love of Christ, then you and I don't see the love of Christ the same way. And I think it's well past time that, like, instead of creating lines between us and them, between Christians and non-Christians, we need to kind of start creating lines between Christians and other Christians,
Yeah, as much as that's not, an ideal situation at all, right? But we're in a place where, we are responsible to make sure that our churches are living up to the expectations of Jesus' teaching.
Yeah.
And, we can't just say, well, I agree with some aspect of this ministry, like, this D. James Kennedy thing. I can't be like, well, I uphold traditional marriage and they uphold traditional marriage, so I'm going to support them. It's like, well, if they're upholding it with lies, then they're demeaning your position. If your position has any merits of its own,
right?
And it mocks God,
right?
And that to me is really the most tragic part of this kind of thing, is that it's you're spreading lies to try to, like, get people to side with you. And then on top of it, when you're called out for it, you sue the people who called you out for being liars.
Right.
And then you try to take it to the Supreme Court. I mean, like, it's just like, how petty is that? We're like, what does the Bible say? It's like, if Jesus said it, right? Like, if somebody slaps you on the cheek, offer them the other.
Right.
And this is not about if somebody physically strikes you and, with malice, this is talking about like an insult move,
Right.
And so it's like, if somebody insults you, like, gives you like the most degrading low insult.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, let him do it. Like, make him do it again.
Right.
Like, that takes control, that gives you the control, but that's exactly the opposite of what, this ministry did with the SPLC.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's just all sorts of problems.
Yeah. The only other thing I want to add to this is the part that infuriates me the most is it seems like no matter what happens, D. James Kennedy wins, right? On the one hand, the Supreme Court refuses to take his case, so it looks like a loss, but it's not, because now he can go out to all of his supporters and raise a crap ton of money for his next campaign of hate, right?
Right. It's like, you can't wear a white hood, so you wear victimhood.
Right. Or on the other hand, like if you just leave him alone and you don't hold him accountable, then he gets to go around preaching hate to his heart's content. And so no matter what, he kind of wins, because no matter what, he gets something out of it that benefits him and his organization. And that drives me nuts, that nobody can kind of see through the smoke and mirrors of it.
Yeah. Well, it's there's other things out there that are worse than this. And that might be the saddest part of it yet.
Yeah, for sure.
So, I guess speaking to that point, then this is a fun one. So the Presbyterian Church USA, PCUSA, decided that they were going to label, in like their official capacity, Israel, the nation of Israel, as an apartheid state.
Oh, them fighting's words.
Right. And there's this guy, so his name is Rabbi Eric J. Greenberg, and he says that PCUSA leadership has violated God's commandment not to bear false witness, rendered itself irrelevant to the world of peacemaking, and made a mockery of honest dialogue with interfaith relations.
Yeah, that all sounds pretty accurate to me. I don't have a problem with that so far.
Yeah, because he calls this an insult to Jews and Christians alike, which damages interfaith relations. So there's a difference, and I don't know if you know this, but humans practicing a religion and geopolitical entities are different things.
Say it ain't so. Mark, say it ain't so.
It's so. It is so. And so, accusing not, Israel as a people, but Israel as a geopolitical body, principally the government, being apartheid. Now, I don't really know if anybody understands that, like, when you have a law that allows a Jewish family in your country to walk into a house full of Palestinian Muslims or even Palestinian Christians, and saying, I own this house, you get out.
Right.
Then, like, the police will get rid of those people for you.
Right.
If they don't leave of their own free accord. Like, this is apartheid. And, PCUSA here is way behind the curve on recognizing this fact.
Right.
And what's going on between Israel and Palestine is one-sided. It's Israel doing to Palestine. Palestinians have no recourse for it.
Right.
And so it's like, yes, this is a legitimate way to designate the nation state of Israel. It's not saying Jews. And this whole thing of saying, well, by calling Israel like the government of Israel jackwads, then you're calling all Jews jackwads. It's like, that's a major false equivalence.
Yeah, so there's lots of layers to this onion. But let's stick to the part where we're at. Let's actually talk about the nation state of Israel for a second and how terrible they are, for lack of a better word. I just feel like I want, like, every time we say the nation of Israel, I just want, like, the sound of sad trombones, right? like you mentioned, like, forcing people out of their houses. But, like, that is barely, like, that is, when you think about the indiscriminate, like, unofficial war that Israel has been waging on Palestine, missiles in retribution for petty crimes, it is just unbelievable how the world has kind of turned a blind eye because of the political nuances involved to what it means to kind of to slap Israel on the wrist. Even a slap on the wrist would send half of America into a tailspin of rage.
Yeah, and this is like the I guess the equivalent, right, of saying you're a big meanie.
Yeah, like, exactly. It's not even that.
That's it.
Right. It's like this is the equivalent of, like, please stop, or something like that. Yeah. And it's unfortunate that Americans have such short memories, because there was a time when apartheid ruled the airwaves and was all that was on the news channels night after night after night, in regards to South Africa.
Yeah.
There was a time in the morality of this country, sometime like after the Greatest Generation won the world wars and before the baby boomers kind of decided that money rules everything, right? There was a time in this country when we had a true moral compass, right? And we looked at the world, even though we didn't, like, at the time, information didn't move at the speed of light the way it does today. You know, information came in small chunks, and we dealt with it the best we could with the limited information we had. But when we saw injustice in the world, even if we couldn't do anything, we looked at it fearlessly and called it injustice. And we rallied the world together and said, either you recognize this injustice with us, or you are simply not part of this global community that is forming right before our eyes. You know what I mean?
It's always fun when I hear, you know, like quotes from, you know, old Republican presidents saying things that if you said it today would get you chased out of the party, you know, they'd probably tar and feather you on your way out.
Right.
It's just kind of madness.
Yeah.
You know, like we forget, like, you know, people tried to do the right thing before, regardless of, you know, what it affected.
Yeah.
And it's important. I mean, they didn't always do the right thing. I mean, come on, you know, it took us into how long to get rid of slavery, but, you know, it's like, you know, people were trying to do the right thing. And I think that's an important lesson to point out here. Yeah. But like, I think like the worst thing for me in this, right, is that there is this, you know, vein in Christianity, like this just really strange, I don't know what to call it. Like, I mean, Christian Zionism is what I would call it, but it's like, you know, it's like, it's tied to, you know, dispensational millennialism and like all that, you know, like super, like, you know, left behind end times kind of Christianity. Yeah. But like this blind dedication to the nation state of Israel. I think it's just because they believe, right, that, you know, if Israel exists as a nation, even though the current nation state of Israel is not explicitly, you know, messianic, which I think even by their own admission should have been like a prerequisite for this. And, you know, and they're doing stuff which is against Jesus's teaching, whatever, you know, it's just like, get over yourselves, people. But like it's such a thick strain, and because it's so common in evangelical circles, it's like it gets difficult, you know, as a Christian to kind of be like, no, Israel is an apartheid state. They suck. Like, individual Israelites don't suck. Just this geopolitical entity sucks.
It really is. It's a shame. Like somewhere in somebody's teenage years, their pastor told them that Israel is God's chosen people. And that's all they heard. And they carried that through the rest of their life. And I don't know what to do with that. Like, if you don't look at the world around you and see the killing and the human rights atrocities that are happening in and around Israel and kind of go, well, that's bad, then I don't know what to do for you.
Yeah, you know, and the worst part of it is that just the process of pointing to what they're doing and calling it out is enough for people to say, like, you know, you are bearing false witness that, like, this rabbi had said. And it's like, you know, you're bearing false witness. It's like, I'm bearing false witness. It's Israel that just bombed Syria out of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
You know, it is Israelis that are just taking homes away from Palestinians, right? Like, that's like we know what's happening in your country, like, and, you know, you're not gonna be able to defend it because, like, in no way, shape, or form can we say that it's false witness to tell the truth.
Yeah. All right, we pounded that one into death. Let's move along.
I want to pound it more. Pound it more.
Yeah, I don't know what else. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you know, this is like the worst, dumbest thing I've seen today, right?
It's a shame that you have to qualify that with today. You know?
Yeah. You know, and it's not that I'm trying to be, you know, overly dramatic. I mean, I
Yeah.
kind of am, right? I mean, it's a
Right.
podcast. You know,
Yeah.
cut me some slack for that.
Right. It's
Um,
theater. We're acting.
Right. You know, but like we've talked before, right, about, you know, like this idea that Christians have a persecution complex.
Yes.
And so then today, or maybe it was yesterday, I think it was today, you know, I see this article pop. So it says 59% of American Christians say they're persecuted. The rest of the headline is, may not understand real persecution.
Nice.
Just made me giggle because I saw a bunch of headlines just kind of randomly pop up about, like from this Lifeway thing. Yeah, survey. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Ugh. So yeah, this Lifeway survey that they did, where like they're just asking people like how do you perceive, you know, your position in the world, and to say that 60% of Americans, I mean, believe that they're being American Christians, whether they're being actively persecuted,
Right.
like probably because like somebody put them on the SPLC, you know, extremist group list.
Yeah.
You know,
Like, it's either like one of two things has to be true here. One, either people don't understand. They don't understand. I don't even know. I just had this great thought, Mark, and it just disappeared. I really had this like well thought out, and now it's totally gone. I'm so mad.
I wish I could help you get it back. So let me spout some more dumb stuff at you then. So, so the survey was 1,005, which is just a weird number, Americans, and over 54% believe that religious freedom is eroding. I know, it's like, so like there's this majority of American Christians, which I'm not exactly sure how to read that. This stat could be way off. I'm not sure like how they controlled for anything. I mean, it's a very small sample size, you know, when you're talking about the United States. I mean, 1,000 Americans is not a lot of Americans.
Right. That hardly seems, that hardly seems to be statistically relevant.
Right. You know, and if like all like, you know, if most of these 1,005 Americans were, let's say like, you know, rural Americans, okay.
Yeah.
Which don't tend to be Catholic,
Right.
you know, or Orthodox, you know, they tend toward being evangelical. So like this may be like a very weighted thing. So I don't know if it's like legitimately to say, you know, that 59% of American Christians believe this, or if it's, you know, like it could be like a larger, like 80% of evangelical Christians believe this, but like Lutherans, like 20% believe this. I don't know.
Yeah. There's a fundamental thought brewing in my head that people who get everything they want under the sun are probably not persecuted.
Really?
That's kind of what I'm saying here. I don't know if that makes a ton of sense, but that's kind of where I'm going. Is we seem to be in an era where the evangelical Christian seems to be getting everything they want. Prayer on the football field, overturning Roe v. Wade. There's a story about a Christian think tank that has nothing to do with church declaring itself a church so it can avoid paying taxes. Every church in America now talks politics without the fear of paying taxes. So I'm not really sure what qualifies as Christian persecution in America, I guess, is my problem.
Yeah. And, you know, I guess the other thing is like, how are we defining persecution? Because, you know, when we talk about, you know, persecution in, you know, let's say like the early church,
right?
You know, you're talking like you might go to the market and nobody will sell to you,
right?
Because you're a Christian, you know, and like things like that. So, you know, to say like, you know, like as a Christian, you can have a podcast and a YouTube channel. I'm not going to point out any specific examples of that, but you're just able to do that. You know, you can write books. You can find people that will actually publish it on real paper.
Right. You can protest freely as a Christian outside of, let's say, an abortion clinic without the fear of being arrested. And there are
Right.
people in this country who cannot protest because of the color of their skin without fear of being arrested or beaten or killed.
Hmm.
Right. So the idea of Christians being persecuted for their faith, it's offensive. It really is.
Right. And there's a quote here that I just have to share. So this is from Scott McConnell, executive director of Lifeway Research, said, "Intolerance is about cultural pushback. In the American marketplace of ideas, not all systems of thought are welcomed. The majority of all religions notice this pushback against Christianity today." That is Christians Today, not Christianity Today. That's a magazine.
Oh yeah.
Sorry.
But like it's such a poorly formed thought. In the American marketplace of ideas, not all systems of thought are welcomed. Well, there's a reason for that because most systems of thought are bad. And so there is no obligation on my part to affirm and consider stupid ideas, right?
Right. And I think there's a word that I came across in a podcast I listened to, and they'll use the word relitigate, and I love that, so like we do not need to relitigate slavery.
Right.
Okay. It's done. It's over. It's bad. It's like universally panned by like the entirety of the world. So we don't need to allow pro-slavery people to have a booth, if you will, in the marketplace of ideas. And like this metaphor, even this marketplace of idea metaphor, it bothers me. And it's kind of problematic because it assumes that, people should be able to just sell their ideas on the open market. But the reality is that some ideas, we are going to sit there and say like, yeah, Nazism is bad. KKK bad, all this whole racism, genocide stuff, it's bad. We don't need to relitigate any of that.
Right. Yeah, I think there's an assumption when we talk about the marketplace of ideas, there's an assumption that the good ideas rise to the top and the bad ideas die. But that's not what happens. That's not what happens in the real world. In the real world, bad ideas live all the time. The idea, for instance, that the internet can forever be unregulated, right? Because that's the ultimate form of free speech, and nobody could ever lie to the point where elections are put into peril. We could never use the internet to do something like rig voting machines, for instance. But these ideas are still out there, mostly by the people who benefit from them, right? Facebook would be the first, like Mark Zuckerberg would be the first person to tell you that unless Congress gets their heads together and creates some legislation, they're not going to censor anybody because it's not in their financial interest to. And as far as they're concerned, they're just a platform and people are free to say what they want. And this is America after all, right?
Yeah. And it's a shame that like this guy kind of said out loud what the game is here. He said it's about cultural pushback. That's what intolerance is. It's about cultural pushback. So really what he's saying is that Christians are losing their foothold as the cultural dominators.
But they're not. That's the thing. At this moment, they're not. Anybody who has that idea that in America Christians are losing a foothold aren't paying attention. If anything, they're gaining ground. And I know that I'm speaking fast and I sound all passionate. Yeah. But that's just observational truth, right? That right now the church seems to be winning and gaining a lot of ground. Now I understand that that's a cyclical thing, right? There's a pendulum that goes back and forth. Yeah. And at some point the Christians are going to mess this up and there's going to be a backlash and then, the back and forth continues, right? Like in the meantime, I'm kind of hating life, waiting for that time to happen. But, what do? You just kind of wait and you kind of talk about what stupid things are happening in the church. And hopefully, the people start to kind of get their act together and, move back towards a more sensible middle ground,
Yeah, and of course this guy's, probably like a lot of people, he's a hypocrite about this, because I know plenty of Christians out there who, if you try to talk to them about socialism, will just have a fit. Like, that's not even like, you can't even talk about it. Like, that's not a loud topic of conversation because it's just bad. Yeah. When anything is just bad, Christians like to just not talk about it. And Christians do this all the time. So it's not even like this guy is saying, like nobody's just letting us have our opinions. Well, if you're spreading lies like, like the D. James Kennedy ministries, yeah, nobody should be letting you have your marketplace idea. You're spreading falsity.
Right. Like your
That's
opinion
what it is.
Your opinion is fine in the confines of your own brain, right? The minute that it comes out your mouth and you start saying things like D. James Kennedy, that all gay people should not have rights in this country. Well,
Yeah.
that's when a whole bunch of people are going to rise up and say that's just kind of dumb. Oh, that's really dumb, really. And what kind of Christian is it that hasn't girded themselves for some pushback, right? We believe, right? We believe that there is a singular God represented in three persons who created everything in 7 days, who wiped out all of humanity, save for some in a great flood, who gave a baby to a virgin, who lived a sinless life, who was God incarnate, who was put on a cross to pay for the sins of all mankind, was buried 3 days later, rose again, physically ascended to heaven to prove his power over death, and seated at the right hand of the Father. Like, that's a lot to take in.
just a little bit, yeah.
Right? And so the fact that, like, there is no room in our worldview to take a little pushback, but you want the world just to kind of go, yeah, it makes perfect sense. Like, any policy you want, it's yours, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the people that you hate, let's kill them. Hey, by the way, that sounds a lot like, the Roman emperors. That sounds a lot like, the Egyptian rulers, and, all the people that persecuted God's people. Sounds really familiar, by the way. Just saying. Don't hate. Or hate,
yeah.
But just put it in the comments for the algorithm love.
Yeah,
Ching.
So, just I want to just leave, this episode off with, one basic thought is that we need to do better.
Yes.
We need to stop playing the victim and, claiming that people are being bad. When people call us names, we need to not sue them, and if somebody says that, we're an extremist, maybe we should take the time to look at what we think just a little bit, be a little bit self-critical here, be self-aware, and, just don't go with the flow of those around you just because that's what everybody is doing. Don't be afraid to question things, because, questioning the way, you are participating in Jesus's church, that's an important thing to do. Because if you're just kind of going along with whatever everybody else is telling you, this is how you have to think about this or that other subject, you're going to be led astray.
That's good. That's good. And that is incredibly sensible advice. And that's pretty rare coming from us.
Yeah. Well, it's almost as good as what we could have gotten from Rob Bell.
Oh, man. Rob Bell. Yes. Yeah. Yes, indeed. He would have had much more sensible things to say about this, and he would have done it in a way that is uplifting and fun as well. I really do hope there's a day, really, in all seriousness, I do hope there's a day where he catches wind of us and we can have a conversation, because I would just love to hear his story on how he came up with his style of being able to inspire people and talk about faith and religion without being off-putting, to the people he's trying to speak to. So, yeah, I would just love to have him as a guest.
That would be fantastic.
Yeah.
But until then, we've got people that are listening to and watching this. And you know what? We got you. So, we're happy.
Absolutely. And by the way, I dropped the ball today. See?
I just thought about that too.
Because we do have a new subscriber, and we always want to show our appreciation for those of you that are that have joined the community, so to speak, and are kind of along for the ride. As bumpy as a ride as it is, man, it's not boring, let me tell you that. But this week we have Allison Christie. Allison, thank you so much for subscribing. We really appreciate it. And for all the rest of you out there that are within the sound of my voice or looking at this video, anywhere you can type in a search engine, type in Church's Lame, and you're bound to find us. If you're watching us on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. Help us with the algorithm. We have the podcast if you're the kind of person who likes taking content on your bicycle or in your car or something like that. And leave us a review or a rating if you would please. And if you really want to get a hold of us right away and it can't wait, you can email us at churcheslamepodcast@gmail.com.
Yeah, I know. It's wonderful that we offer people who are complete perverts the ability to not look at a screen while hearing our unctuous voices.
Unctuous.
I had to reach for a
Nice.
word, man. That was the first one that got there. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I like it. So like we're sending people to dictionaries all over the world. I'm all for it. I'm here for it.
Yeah, I probably didn't even use the word right. So, whatever.
Even better.
All right. Well, with that, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Amen.